You're a ghost, fa la 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 la. You're a ghost, fa la 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 la. I'm the church and I've come to bang you with my iron drum, fa la 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 la. Hello and welcome to Casual Krakoa. Hey everybody, I'm Dave Busing, founder and editor-in-chief of comicbookherald.com. This is Casual Krakoa, where we go through the X-Men comics released today. Today we got Immortal X-Men #1, baby. It's a good one from Kieron Gillen, Lucas Wernick, and company. We're going to talk about it in detail, okay? Now, if you are here on the live stream, one, be forewarned, this is going to be a spoiler-filled conversation about what happened in Immortal X-Men #1 today. Okay, so be prepped for that. And two, if you can hear what I'm saying, see what I'm doing, let me know here in the live chat so that I know everything is up and running smoothly. Thank you very much for being here. If you're here live too, I very much appreciate it. But okay, this was a big day, a big test for X-Men comics, and we have a lot to talk about. So definitely get your questions in as well. The super chat is open and available. Thanks to those who participate. And I will prioritize those questions and get to as many as I can. But of course, we got to talk about what happened in this big kickoff to the Destiny of X. All right, it looks like everything's going well. Let's do it. Okay, Casual Krakoa talking Immortal X-Men #1. And yes, you are welcome for the John Cale 1919 introduction here. If you were here at the very start, that is thematically relevant as well for Kieron Gillen's work here, and referenced a handful of times in this comic. So, Immortal X-Men #1, we got writer Kieron Gillen, artist Lucas Wernick, colors by David Curiel, letters by Clayton Cowles. First thought on this. One, real good. Really enjoyed it. Second thought, I'm glad Immortal X-Men doesn't really play with or respond to X lives and X deaths of Wolverine, right? It's better for it, honestly. And I think what is so refreshing about Immortal X-Men #1 today is it feels like a refresh. You know, what is so refreshing is it feels like a refresh, just in the sense of like, hey, why are we here? What are we doing? You know, what is the point of all this, right? What did House and Powers establish, and what is the Krakoa era? What are we doing here? You know, I tweeted earlier, it feels like you walk into a room, you walk into the kitchen, and you're like, wait, why am I here? What am I doing? I forgot what I was going to do, right? And then just all of a sudden, Immortal X-Men is that it's the clarifying moment. It's that moment of like, oh yeah, we're here to have a mutant quiet council trying to lead a nation. We're here to have political backstabbing. We're here to explore the immortality of mutant kind, their past, their present, and their future. And we're here to have fun with this crazy amped up version of Mr. Sinister. And that's thankfully what this comic does. I think it is anyone who is familiar with Gillen's Uncanny X-Men run from a decade ago. Yes, it's been a decade. You know, it's no surprise that he leads with Sinister as the POV character, right? Gillen is the one, and I've said this many times, he made Sinister walk so Hickman could make him run, right? This version of the character, this more comedic, dramatic version of Sinister, and he's the driver of the book's action here, and it's a fit. It's a great fit, too, because Sinister remains one of the major players, okay, that we haven't really explored, like their connections, their ties to the big picture, okay? Moira was obviously the #1 example of that for the longest time, but now that cat's out of the bag, if you know, at the very least, which I feel like it's understating it, after Inferno, X Lives, X Deaths, and even a little bit here with Immortal X-Men, but we still have a lot to do with Sinister, and this comic grounds things very well, okay? So we're definitely going to want to talk about what's going on here with Mr. Sinister, what the secrets are. Again, this conversation is going to assume that you've read it or know what happens or don't care if you get spoiled, because we have to talk about the ending. Frankly, the ending of this comic reframes the way it is read the first time around, which is a really cool craft trick. I think like the first opening sequences of this comic genuinely read differently knowing how it ends. And I think that's an exciting thing to talk about and a really effective way to do have an individual unit of comic matter, right? And mean something and have value. That means, yeah, there's a reason I could read this more than once. Okay, I'm seeing here in the comments, you could easily read Immortal X-Men immediately after Inferno #4 and not miss a beat. I think that's true. Honestly, I think that's true. I also think like there's a really good chance that behind the scenes, this was entirely written before X Lives and X Deaths. like there's a really good chance that Immortal X-Men #1 was done and off to the printers before anything to do with X Lives and X Deaths, right? Probably Gillen was given, in these X Office chats, like a sense of, okay, what are we doing here? Is there anything I need to be aware of that is going to break the story I'm telling? But otherwise, it just reads like basically like X Lives and X Deaths didn't happen. So if you were out on that event or you checked out on that event, for the moment, you're totally fine. You're totally fine. Inferno kind of sets the stage for where we're at. I think that is probably true. And again, like I don't like continuity being ignored or pieces of the puzzle being very quickly passed over. I don't think X Lives and X Deaths are going to be ignored like for the entirety of the Krakoa era. Like there's some big stuff there. Like, so for those of you who haven't read, that comic ends, X Deaths ends with Moira turning herself into some version of an Omega Sentinel or a Nimrod or whatever. She doesn't have her mutant abilities anymore. She is now sort of reincarnated as very powerful AI that wants to kill all mutants, okay? She kind of terminated herself. And that's gonna come up, all right? Probably even in Immortal X-Men down the line. But right now, that's not what we're focused on. That's not what we're doing. We're getting back to like, okay, what's going on in Krakoa? What matters? What are we trying to accomplish here? And what is the point of all this? What is the point of all this? And the point of all this is eternal mutants. It is finding an eternal place for mutant kind to survive and thrive. Okay? That is the point of the Krakoa era. It's not just a temporary, we have our own island, and that's a success. And that's what a lot of the Dawn and the Reign have focused on, is that sort of present day temporary focus on, hey, we got our island, we have success in the moment, right? But the House and Powers big picture of all of this is survival, not just into the next generation, not just into the generation after that. It's survival for mutant kind thousands and thousands of years into the future. Treating this truly, looking at Immortal and looking at what that means is incredibly important and one of the most interesting things that can be done with the series. And Kieron Gillen, the writer here, is a great fit for that, right? Not only is he currently writing Marvel's Eternals and doing the best work that's ever been done on the title. Yes, I know Jack Kirby created these characters, okay? But he's touching in that regard. His creator-owned stuff, like The Wicked and Divine, deals with gods and godlike figures and the immortality of these types of creatures. Obviously, he played with this as well back, when I mentioned a decade ago at Marvel, when he was doing Uncanny X-Men, Journey into Mystery, working on Loki, working on the Asgardians, obviously playing with immortal godlike figures there as well, okay? So it's a creator who's well-versed in this mythos, who's well-versed in sort of how these stories perpetuate and run over time, and you can tell that. You can feel, without any plot, just from the confidence and the tone and the structure, this is one of the best single issue kickoffs in this era of X-Men, right? There have been a handful that have been quite good. Obviously, House and Powers, Sword #1, I think was incredible work by Al Ewing. And then this one probably is like, third in that mix. It's probably third in that mix. And again, there's a ton writing on this. Because the Destiny of X is the third wave of X-Men comics since House and Powers, and it is the only one that is kicking off at a time where the mojo of these X-Men comics is failing, right? Jonathan Hickman, the chief architect, he's out, he has left. We went from Inferno to X Lives and X Deaths, Whiplash with sort of what they're doing with Moira there. A lot of fans put off by that. It has its moments, but it also has really bad moments, and the Destiny of X needed to step in. It needs to step in and say, here's why we're here. Here's why this was fun in the first place. Come on and enjoy the ride. And that's what Immortal X-Men does. It does it about as well as I could frankly imagine it happening. And it made me, we had a review up on Comic Book Herald today, and by Celise, our writer there. And the thing that they right there is, it made me more excited for this book than I expected to be coming out of it. And I had the exact same experience, right? By the time I get to that final page reveal, I'm more excited. I was already excited for Immortal X-Men. I mean, I've been saying for a while, I have very high expectations. I have very high hopes. But I also have very high confidence that this is going to be a good X-Men book, right? I've got high confidence in Immortal X-Men. I've got high confidence in X-Men Red. And I've got high confidence in New Mutants, probably, because it's been doing it. But beyond that, everything's a little up in the air, right? Oh, and I've got high confidence in Sabretooth because it's already out and it's already one of the best books of the year. But like other than that, in the X Office, everything else is a maybe, right? Everything else is tentative, varying degrees. But I already knew Immortal X-Men was going to be good. I didn't expect to be this excited coming out of it. And that's great. That's awesome. That's exactly the type of high. That's exactly the type of excitement that I'm looking for in these comic books, right? And in this era of X-Men is to be surprised, to be reminded about why these can be so fun and what we're playing with and all the potential and value. I mean, because Hellions has been done for a while, and I know it's only been, maybe 3 months now. But like I almost had forgotten, like, oh yeah, like hanging out with this wild Mr. Sinister is an extremely captivating style of storytelling, and we're firmly reminded of that here, I think, in this issue. So we're going to talk through the beats. Again, get in your questions, get in your comments here in the chat. All that I ask is you be respectful to those around you, and we won't, have any issues. But otherwise, I'm going to try to address whatever questions I have and then just talk through my own thoughts on the comic. Obviously, very positive overall. I've got some theories. I've got Sinister Secrets breaks down. Okay, I've got every Sinister Secret already figured out, so don't worry about that. We can talk about it. Honestly, like, they weren't that tricky. So we can talk about what they are. There's a handful where I'm like, okay, maybe we need a theory to solve this. And we can one thing I want to talk about today is like, what are the biggest questions that Immortal X-Men raises, right? Because it's not all just like, oh, here's where we're going. Like, it raises some new interesting questions about, okay, but why does this event matter, or why does this event play out this way, right? So first off, let's talk about this super chat here from Rod. It says, forget about Selene, forget about Hope. Krakoa needs Jesus in the Quiet Council, probably Omega level, and probably has his ways in magic. There is a tease here by Exodus that the Nazareth, I believe as he refers to him, was a mutant. Okay, this has gotten a lot of people's attention for obvious reasons, because it is not out of the question that Marvel would claim Jesus was a mutant. I don't think as a brand owned by Disney, they would go so far as to canonize it and actually have the media attention that goes with that. But as a joke-y thing from Exodus, obviously it's out there. Marvel has done... Like, there's wild stuff in the Marvel, like Santa's a mutant, for example, by certain arguments in certain comics, right? Santa's also Odin, if you look at certain comics. Like there's strange stuff in Marvel lore that is out there. Obviously, Jesus is going to get a lot more attention and a lot more controversy than the fictional Santa. So is Jesus a mutant? My take on it is Exodus was not alive during that time. Okay, Exodus has centuries of history here, and I think that's why this character is going to be especially interesting in the Immortal X-Men. Right, all the characters that have they don't talk in decades; they talk in centuries. Right, Sinister, Destiny, and Mystique apparently in Exodus, and then you got Apocalypse out there. You got Selene, right, but they're not necessarily on the Quiet Council. All those characters are the most interesting, I think, in this run, because they have mutant history in a way that no one else does on the Quiet Council. But Exodus, he's not actually around until the Crusades. He's not actually around until post Jesus. He doesn't come around until later. So his assumption or desire to just claim Jesus as a mutant, that actually is very of a piece with the character, right? He's obsessed with messiahs. Okay, he messiahized Magneto in the 90s. He's doing it again with Hope Summers here. The mutant messiah, she's often talked about in those terms during the Second Coming era. It's not surprising that he was assumed that anyone that had that kind of power, that had that kind of religious influence, probably also a mutant. Okay, so I wouldn't literalize it too much. I don't expect that's what's happening, but I appreciate the super chat there. I appreciate the comment, because definitely that is a big thing to throw out there casually. And we'll see if it comes up again. My guess is no. Okay, so I talked about what happens in this comic. Let's start, I think, more or less at the top, And let's pull up some of those visuals, some good stuff here from Lucas Wernick. So this comic opens with what is now a trope of sorts in X-Men comics, where two characters meet on a park bench, right? And this is referential to Professor X and Moira in House of X and Powers. We saw this sequence mined for sort of violent, dark comedy in X Deaths of Wolverine, and now we're seeing it recycled but repurposed here intentionally with Mr. Sinister and Destiny. And they are here in Paris 1919, also the reference point for John Cale's awesome song, Paris 1919, which you may have heard me if you're here at the start, singing aloud. And it's a sequence where you have two mutants showing, one, that they have been around for a whole bunch of time, right? This is post-World War I. And Destiny here, she's talking to Mr. Sinister, and she's basically like, I see a war coming, okay? And there's a nice punny sort of play here on an orchestral version, an orchestral song, and I forget the name. I wouldn't have known it prior to this. It has a variation in there called Nimrod, right? And Gillen uses that, and he references, like, when Destiny heard that, when she heard the Nimrod sequence, she had a meltdown. She had a fit, as she describes it, in the theater. And Mr. Sinister teases her about this, but it's Destiny actually having these visions of things to come. And she's saying, there's this war coming, Sinister, and, like, we actually need to be on the same side. We actually need to be working together if we're going to get through it. Sinister obviously replies glibly, but then Destiny appears to whisper a secret so powerful that it melts Sinister's brain. Okay, possibly it was something like there was a second shooter in Ford's Theater, but more likely it was a game changer for this Sinister as the master schemer. You know, like Moira's version of this that she has with Professor X is showing him psychically all of her lifelines, showing him we always lose, right? She actually has like visuals. Destiny just tells Sinister something, or as far as we know, that's what happens. My initial reaction to this was like, okay, maybe it's something along the lines of you're a clone, or you're not the real Sinister, or we've had this conversation 75 times, right? And a lot of this is now based on what we see in the ending of this, which obviously we're going to talk about. So Sinister, again, like his brain literally melts. He's muttering, "You're a ghost," as he dies. So again, like cementing the parallels to John Cale's awesome Paris 1919. Again, the location and year when this scene takes place. It makes me think he's now realizing he's merely like a simulacrum trapped in a test Moira timeline meant to deliver data back to the real Sinister we're following in present-day Krakoa. Okay, and what am I talking about there? Why does that make any sense? Well, it makes some sense because the very end of this comic reveals that Mr. Sinister is cloning Moiras, okay? We're in an era now, the second age of Krakoa, where everyone on the Quiet Council knows about Moira. Only Professor X and Magneto knew. Then in Inferno, Emma finds out. Mystique and Destiny find out. Now everyone on the Quiet Council knows. Okay, and Mr. Sinister, having learned this, started cloning Moiras, and he's using them to gather data about what's going to happen, right? How things are going to play out, and then have it sort of re-augmented back into his own brain, and he's just cloning all these Moiras. I think we are on the 26th at the start of this comic book. Okay, so like that is his secret. He finds out about Moira's abilities. Again, Emma tells the entire Quiet Council in her rage towards Professor X and Magneto for keeping the secret in the first place, and he begins cloning Moira's and experimenting on her ability to reset and relive life. So whereas we are now familiar with Sinister basically ensuring immortality by transferring consciousness to various clones of himself, you know, sort of manufacturing godhood, right? That is now extended to replaying moments of a timeline with the knowledge of how things played out previously using cloned Moiras. And listen, this could go in a million different directions. It's incredibly exciting because of that. If nothing else, it temporarily sets up a fascinating competitive relationship between Sinister and Destiny, with both able to play out versions of the future and think they have the best understanding of how events are likely to unfold. It's cool, too, how this reveal reframes the entire issue, right? On the first read, Sinister is referring to himself as 26, with the implication being some familiar Sinister clone scheme, right? I assumed he was the 26th Sinister, and he thinks he knows everything with how Magneto's replacement on the Quiet Council will play out. And like in the moment, so like Magneto steps up and he says, I'm stepping down from the Quiet Council. This is not surprising, right? We've seen Magneto teased in the X-Men Red Solicits. We know he's going to be a part of that book written by Al Ewing. So like, again, it's not a shock. Like if you, like, he's not in the teaser image, right? There were all these threads that part of it's not surprising, but Sinister thinks he knows exactly how the sequence of voting for Magneto's replacement is going to happen. In the moment, I just took this to be like, well, he's Sinister, right? He knows things and has secrets. He always has. But what we learn by issue's end is he thinks he knows how it will play out because he's already received data from 25 Moiras telling him what's going to happen. And that's what makes the irony of him getting it wrong so delicious. And it's a huge part of what makes this comic moving forward so incredibly exciting, is that Sinister's back pocket is not just that he's working on chimers anymore, okay, which we know he's been doing through Hellions. It's not just that he's, of course, making clones of everyone and their mother, right? It's that he's got Moira's, and he's using her abilities, and it's going to get weird, and it's going to get wild, but you know what? Like, that has come up so much in this era, right? Ever since there was a break with Inferno, and frankly, even before, people like myself, fans like yourself, have been asking, like, well, okay, but couldn't Krakoa resurrect Moira? Couldn't they like make a clone of her and use her powers that way? Gillen's actually embracing that challenge, right? He's taking it on here through the lens of Mr. Sinister, who of course would hear about this power and think, how can I use that for myself in my own schemes? It makes perfect sense. It's fantastic. And it's really interesting. It's going to lead to some exciting stuff. Again, exactly what it'll be, we don't know. But it also kind of casts into doubt, like, anything we see here in this book, in Immortal X-Men right now, we don't know, like, exactly which version of reality is happening, how Sinister is tampering with it, if it's a clone of his, if he's in one Moira's timelines and is going to reset it, right? It all gets complicated. He's an incredibly unreliable narrator as is. And I think in these very confident, excellent creators' hands, that's going to work out. That's going to work out to our benefit, where then when we get to a resolution, it's going to, all that messiness is going to come together and be something very exciting. So I love that reveal. I love the use of Sinister here. I mean, I think the plan for the first like 12-ish issues, I think it's going to shift between each member of the Quiet Council as a POV. I feel like I read that in an interview somewhere. So it's not just going to be Sinister all the time. At least that's my expectation. Frankly, I'd be fine with that if it was. I think I'd really enjoy that book. But I don't think it's going to be that book. Nonetheless, we'll know what he's doing in the background, right? We'll know what Sinister's doing. We'll know what he's doing with these Moira clones in the background. Now, I think one piece of this that I find interesting is my assumption when I saw that initially was, okay, Sinister's got Moira's, but he's probably only got Moira clones ever since he learned about this, right? So let's say 2 weeks, right? Whatever. But it's like a short-term thing. So the Moira clones, they can't like necessarily, like, can he use them to like go back to Paris 1919, for example, right? When I'm talking about that theory about him figuring out like, oh, I'm not the real Sinister, Destiny just told me that. Could he use a Moira to do that? That piece obviously is TBD. The way it's set up, there would need to be, then you'd have to integrate some sort of time travel shenanigans, which again, this is Marvel Comics. You can do that. You can find a way. But that's not necessarily baked into this. So I'm curious to see exactly what it does. I think what it means in the short term is Mr. Sinister and Destiny have competing schemes. Within all the competing schemes of the Quiet Council, they have two of the biggest picture ones, and they also have the resources, Destiny just through her mutant gift, to see the different threads of the future, to feel like they know the best and most likely way things are going to play out before it happens, right? So that, like, Sinister's Moira clones are a defense mechanism, are a competitive catch-up to where Destiny's already at. And I think pairing these characters in opposition while simultaneously have them playing on the same team is really, really compelling. Again, one of the things I was most excited about from Immortal X-Men and the potential of it is, like, Destiny needs to get her due as a character. You know, Destiny has not had many moments, you know, throughout history, right? She's either been purely sort of like the object of Mystique's desire because she's literally been off the board since 1989, or when she was around, you know, she was just kind of it was hard to use her powers, right? You get the occasional issue in the Claremont run, like we're talking a small amount that gives multiple pages to Destiny, Irene Adler as a character. And I've got a video up on this, right, on the channel, the history of this character. There's a lot to do to make Destiny more interesting, and I think Gillen's on the right track here. And I think this series has so much potential to really, really nail that. So I'll pause there for a minute. Those are the biggest reveals of what Sinister's doing, what Destiny is going on with Destiny, and of course the clones of Moira that come in this comic. Definitely get in your comments here and your questions, and I'll look at what I can. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm seeing the comment here, he's known about Doug, right? We know Sinister has knowledge of what Doug and Warlock and Krakoa are doing, so he's probably known about Moira more than 2 weeks. That's possible too, right? Do you think Sinister has known about the No Place and about Moira before Emma did? Because if we take that, then all bets are off. But if you accept that he learned about it from Emma, it was something he actually didn't know, then maybe it's a newer thing. But I get that's a good point. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that, I think. This question here from Jason: does the revelation of Moira at the beginning and cloning at the end legitimize Moira's fear of Destiny all the way back to Hox Pox? Moira's fear of Destiny is, I think, another thing entirely. I mean, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy on Moira's end, right? She is so afraid of Destiny, and she is so scared of what her prophecy might do that it dictates all of her actions in this lifeline. She's actually onto a pretty good thing. When Destiny gets resurrected, her powers don't actually change anything, right? In Inferno, Destiny doesn't actually have a vision. She doesn't actually see anything about what Moira's doing. They learn about it from Emma. Mystique and Destiny, it's Moira's fear of Destiny that creates this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, and her hate and sort of emotion over that drives her to the position she's in now. So, I mean, right now, I would say there's not enough has happened to legitimize Destiny as this ultimate threat. I think that's something where there's opportunity. There's something where there's opportunity in this story to explain like why that would be the case, right? What can she know and say to Mr. Sinister that makes his brain melt? These sorts of things show the power of this character. But I don't really think it's hard for me to say anything to the effect of Moira was right about anything, and it's going to be that way for some time because of X Deaths of Wolverine, right? Like Moira was a really interesting, complicated, empathetic to some degree character coming out of Inferno, right? There was a lot of looking at what she was going through. And again, like this is a character too that by the end of Inferno is basically like, yeah, okay, you caught me. My plan was to genocide mutant kind, right? I was going to do it nicely. I was going to cure them, but I was going to force feed, the removal of mutant abilities, right? Like she's not a hero, okay? But she wasn't literally Cameron Hodging herself into Sentinel archvillain territory, So it's going to take some real work, difficult work, to build back the complexity and the interest level in Moira, I think, going forward. And honestly, like this comic, treating her like Immortal X-Men, at least as it sets out in this first issue, looks like it's going to treat Moira like the MacGuffin that kind of the everything sense House and Powers has as well. And you know what? It's like, at this point, that might be the best we can get. That might be the best we can get, is basically just like, she's not a person, she's a power set. It's a very sinister line of thinking, right? There's whole evil monologues in here about how mutants aren't people, they're just resources. He's got a gun that shoots out Cyclops eyes. Okay? Do they even shoot lasers when they're shot out? That was not clarified. Are they just eyeball pellets? Like, that's real sadistic. It's sadistic either way. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be done there, and it's an interesting question. But no, there's really nothing where I can be like, oh yeah, Moira had a point at this point. Like it's all bad, like every piece of it. So all right, keep the questions coming. I'll answer what I can again as well. Let's see, what else can we talk about? Okay, so we got Magneto leaving the council. We've got a conversation about who is going to take that spot. And it's actually a fairly difficult one. Now, I've been advocating for some time, for a while, that one of the key players in this should be Selene. Again, we're talking about characters with tons of mutant history. Selene, arguably the first Marvel mutant. That status means nothing anymore. Like the first mutant. Like, just throw that out. Throw it in the trash. Doesn't matter anymore. Apocalypse, Selene, they've both been around for a real long time. But Selene actually shows up here to make a case for herself. And is actually, it's a really strong case, and like that's why I've been making it. She knows magic. She's been around forever. She points out, like, listen, you lost Apocalypse and you filled the seat with Destiny, but you didn't replace what Apocalypse brought to the table, and that's true. That's 100% true, right? Celine's actually great for that. So I did really dig bringing Selene into the equation. Of course, she loses the seat here. Also, we do also have to call out my favorite thing to continue calling out, which is Selene ran she like whatever, she killed a lot of guys. Selene killed a lot of dudes, a lot of humans in the Captain America run by Ta-Nehisi Coates. Shuri shows up to send her back to Krakoa. She was never penalized for that. Never happened. All right, and listen, the X Office can play their own games. It's weird to have never mentioned it. Just mention it. Just give an excuse. Give a reason. Be like, oh, we gave her a slap on the wrist. She served time with the Hellions for a week. You didn't see it. Say something. It's weirder to say nothing. And just let her off the hook entirely. You don't have to throw her in the pit, clearly. That's not part of the story at this point. But it's weirder to say nothing, I think. But anyway, Selene loses the vote. She loses the vote to Hope Summers, who basically walks in with the power play of like, hey, the five are the most popular and most important individuals on Krakoa. I am ostensibly their leader. Also, Exodus pitched me on why I should be on the council, and here, let's go. Let's do this. And of course, Hope ultimately makes it because Sinister. This is a very funny sequence of Mr. Sinister thinks he knows how all these votes are going to go because he has the knowledge of a Moira from the future sent back to his brain. How does that work? I don't know. It's comics. It's fine. He thinks he knows how it's going to go, but things don't play out exactly like he thinks they will, right? Destiny surprises him with a vote. It's very funny. Like, the way it's structured is great. But he's surprised, and then he has to switch his vote to get Hope on the council because, and he says here, and I quote, let's see if I can find it. I'm going to look for it because I have the quote written, and it's good. But basically, he's like, I need Hope on this council because it's going to precipitate some disasters that he wants to happen. Okay? I think one of the biggest things about this issue to look at and to be asking is, why does Sinister want the things that he wants? Why are the things that are happening, right? Because there are some moments of like, you can just accept that, like, okay, the Quiet Council voted, and oh, Hope's on the Quiet Council. End of story. No. The real story is not who's going to take over on the council. Hope being on the council makes a ton of sense, right? It's clearly connecting to a Gillen favorite. He wrote Generation Hope in the Utopia AVX era, right? Also makes a ton of sense just from like a Krakoan comics perspective. We've seen for a while now how the five are disconnected from the Quiet Council and frequently at odds with their direction and thinking. So like giving them a seat at the table through Hope, it feels inevitable. It makes a ton of sense, more than anyone else here, with the exception, I think, to a degree, of Selene. But again, like, lost in the humor of Sinister misunderstanding these votes is, why does he need Hope on the council? Why is that important to him? So he says here, it's going to lead to various disasters Hope being on the council will precipitate. In the Sinister Secrets, which I want to go through, he also talks about bloodshed in the council chamber. Here's a theory. Could Sinister have seen, through one of the Moira lifelines, Sabretooth coming up out of the pit, killing Hope, right? He attacks the council. It leads to the death of Hope Summers. What does that do for resurrection, right? With the five, like, I think there's been allusion to maybe Sync could come in and mirror Hope's abilities, but what if that doesn't work? They've never had to try that, to my knowledge. Okay? Could that precipitate some of the disasters that Sinister is trying to get to happen to manifest whatever his ultimate schemes are, right? Just something to think about in terms of, why does he want Hope on the council? What's that actually going to lead to? Is it just her voting on certain measures, and that sort of thing? So that's what I find especially interesting about that particular piece of the puzzle. But again, it's purely in terms of like having Hope on the council. Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. Like, the five need that. They've been at odds with Professor X forever. That's got to happen. So all right, let's see. We got some super chats here. Who was the one hero when Hickman said 92, 93 characters were villains? I don't know what that means. If you can provide some clarity on what that is supposed to mean, I will try to answer it. Next super chat. Now I have to read Eternals. Next crossover might be bigger than AVX. Yeah. So first off, I've been saying it for a long, long time. Gillen's Eternals with Esad Ribic is great. It's really, really great. Listen, I'm not a big Eternals comics fan. I don't even like the Gaiman run particularly much. Okay. This Eternals run is really, really great. You should read it just for that reason. It's great stuff. If you like Thanos, read Eternals. Okay. That's a new connection we get to make. That's fun. That's exciting. Gillen's doing awesome work right there. And yes, it's going to tie into, it's going to overlap with X-Men. Immortal X-Men, Eternals, all the Gillen written stuff, it's all coming together in Judgment Day, which is coming this summer. It's AXE they're doing. They're doing this Axe Judgment Day thing at Marvel. That's Avengers, X-Men, Eternals, okay? We got a three-way event, and what kind of three-way isn't exciting, right? I think we can all agree. So Judgment Day is going to be exciting. I have high hopes for what that event can be, because again, you have two, and again, we actually have an issue of Immortal X-Men now where we can say this. We have two good comics, really good comics, two of Marvel's best, coming together, building to an event. And that tends to lead to at least interesting events. At least interesting. And that's one of the Sinister Secrets here as well. So, all right, we got clarification here from Patrick. When Hickman was asked about what characters would appear in Hox Pox, he said there would be 93. When asked how many villains would appear, he said 92, which implies only one character would be a hero. Where's this from? I've never heard about this. And I'm not making fun of you. I'm making fun of this number. I have no familiarity with this idea that there's 93 heroes and 93 villains. I don't know. Like that kind of doesn't mean anything in this era, right? Like this categorization of heroes and villains in Krakoa, like we've kind of done away with that. That's kind of the point of the Krakoa era of X-Men. So I don't know. What's the implication here? Is that there's a missing villain or something from the roster? I don't know. Do we think there's an X-Men that's still missing? I mean, the missing mutants thing is still a thing, right? We've got Absalom, Mercator, Mr. M, probably another world somewhere. That doesn't come up in a minute. Okay. That's an Omega level mutant, the only missing Omega level mutant. We got Nate Gray. Of course, we haven't seen Nate Gray in a minute. I've done videos on missing mutants. I don't know how many of them still are. I don't think we've seen Evan Sabanur, even though he should be fair game now, with again one of Hope's Five's led protests. But yeah, I don't know exactly what those numbers are supposed to mean. I'll have to look that up. I'm not really sure what that's talking about. That doesn't really sound like a thing Hickman would do, like count out a specific amount of characters. I feel like he was probably being facetious because he would do that. But yeah, okay. If I learn more about it, I'll try to come back to it. Maybe there's more to say. I'm seeing from Comic Breakdown here. This comic is amazing, but as you said, we don't know if we can trust anything we are seeing. Love your reviews, but thank you very much. Appreciate that. Yeah, like don't believe everything Mr. Sinister tells you. I think a pretty good life advice here from old Papa Dave. I'll try to give that from time to time. I'm seeing here, just total side note, did you like the Dark Ages miniseries that just ended? Haven't touched it. Have not touched it. I haven't read a single issue. If I get 5 people in the comments that say, Dave, read Dark Ages, I will go read Dark Ages, and I will let you know what I think of it. That is a promise. So, okay, let's talk Sinister Secrets, because I do want to go through sort of what happened here. I don't think there's anything super major that we missed, frankly, in terms of plot points in Immortal X-Men. Again, if you haven't read it, first off, thanks for being here. If you obviously have and are here and still want to talk about it, this is great. I think it's continued to be good, and I have a ton of confidence in Kieron Gillen as a creator. I mean, that's the thing that, so I've been talking about this for weeks now in kind of the build-up, but, when Kieron Gillen was on Uncanny X-Men a decade ago, that was not the same Gillen that we know now, okay? That was not the same writer. He was not in the same place in his career. He had done some good comics, right? I like Phonogram a lot. But in that decade's time, Gillen has done, I would say, all his best work, okay? Since that time when he was on Uncanny X-Men, right? You have Wicked and Divine, you have Peter Cannon Thunderbolt, which is not just a good comic, but a really important comic of the past decade. Obviously, right now, you've got Die, you got Once in Future, you got some others I'm sure I'm missing, okay? The creator has done, and obviously Eternals has been great, right? Gillen has come a long way since his original Uncanny X-Men run, which has great stuff. The Everything is Sinister arc, the first 3 issues, is great, but it's also real inconsistent. It gets tied up in Avengers vs. X-Men in some big ways. It's not a flawless run by any measure. It's not one of my favorite X-Men runs, I wouldn't even say. But there's really good stuff in there. But like this is a creator that is dedicated to craft, that is really interested in how to make the best comics they can make, and like you're gonna see the best of them now a decade later. You know, it's that thing of like it's not exactly this, you know, because it's people in different points in their lives, but it's like, you know, a rookie basketball player versus, you know, LeBron on the Cavs in 2006 versus where he is in 2016, right? Like there's a dominance, there's a craft, there's an understanding of the game that comes to creators as they do just get more reps, right, and just play more games, and that's what we're gonna get the benefit from here in Immortal X-Men. And again, like I tweeted this earlier today too. It's like, name a creator right now who has a better mix of creator-owned stuff and licensed stuff than Kieron Gillen. It's incredibly difficult, okay? It is incredibly difficult to name someone with a better mix of creator-owned works and licensed comics, okay? James Tynion had the crown before he gave up Batman. Arguably still in the mix because he's going to be doing Sandman, and technically The Nice House on the Lake is a Black Label thing, but that's not actually part of the license. Who else do I have in this mix? Cy Spurrier could make a case this year. A lot of interesting Spurrier stuff going on. You've got Suicide Squad Blaze is good stuff, by the way. Let's see, what else? Chip Zdarsky in the conversation. Definitely in the conversation here. Okay, but it's a small list. Ron V. I've got Ron V in there. It is a small list. Kieron Gillen's right at the top. Okay, I'm seeing enough now of go read Dark Ages. I'm actually seeing go read Light Ages, which if there's a satire comic that is making fun of Dark Ages, I will read that as a companion piece. Just send me a link. But I'm seeing enough read Dark Ages that now I feel like I have to do this. I gotta say, like I like Deceased a lot. I'm actually a huge Tom Taylor Injustice fan as well, right? Like I have greatly enjoyed his visions for universes. I think the Tom Taylor Injustice model would be great for Marvel. Not literally doing a story of like, what if Captain America killed the Red Skull? But like giving a creator with a lot of vision, like the reins to do their Marvel universe. I think that would kill, you know? Like that's my perpetual pitch is like give a creator with vision, a Hickman, a Gillen, give them like, hey, it's their Marvel Universe #1. They do 50 issues of it over the course of whatever amount of time it takes, but they just own the whole universe, right? And they just get to do like an out of continuity thing. I think that model would kill. I think that'd be amazing. And it would also be like, that's so new reader friendly, right? Like that's the thing with Taylor's Injustice. It is so new reader friendly because it's all these archetypes of certain characters, and it's also just Taylor's vision the entire way through. And obviously, like, yes, it comes out of a video game tie-in, but then it just becomes like, hey, it's Tom Taylor's DC universe, you know, with that video game premise. And it winds up being really good and really successful as a result. Okay, but that said, like, I don't know, like Dark Ages, I have no enthusiasm for, I suppose, for some reason. But enough people are saying it that I'll read Dark Ages and also Light Ages, I guess. But I can't promise anything. Cannot promise anything. Okay, so what else do we got here? Right, Sinister Secrets. Okay, so Sinister Secret #1, the answer. And I don't have the questions in front of me. I don't know enough about how to stop the image slideshow that I have in front of you to figure it out. But the answer to #1 is definitely just like, oh, it's Sinister talking about he's got a scandal. He's got a young lady with him in his lab. That's Moira, right? It's got to be Moira. Okay. It can't be anyone else, and it can't be romantic, right? Like, there's nothing worse, and I don't think Gillen would touch this, than like someone having a romantic relationship with Mr. Sinister. So we roll that out. The scandal is, of course, he's got private company with the clones of Moira McTaggart that he has made for himself. Sinister Secret #2. Does the fiery newcomer think that the Quiet Council means one must use silencers on all your automatic weapons? That's a reference to Hope. Okay, that's a reference to Hope Summers. For those who are less familiar, Hope, protege of Cable, grew up on the run, learning how to use weapons and survive with good old Nathan Summers. Cable definitely, or Cable has taught Hope to put silencers on her weapons. She's going to bring that to the council. #3, this is one of my favorites. Writer's block is a terrible thing. Rejoice. The muse is going to strike someone who hasn't written a major work for over 100 years. That's going to be Destiny's Diaries. That is going to be Destiny's Diaries. That's exciting. That's interesting to me. Okay, I talked about this last week with Blurred, but like dropping that teaser of Moira chilling with the Destiny's Diaries at the end of X-Men number 20, and then getting through Inferno, and at the end of that too, they were like Inferno coming this summer, also named Destiny's Diaries, and then Destiny's Diaries didn't come up once, not once. Nobody talked about him. Not Destiny, not Moira. None of the information in those diaries was used. That sucked. Like, that was a real bummer. It was purely just a cool visual. It was purely just a cool visual. They had nothing to do with them. Bring them back, Gillen. Bring them back. I would love, love, love to see that. And I think that's what the Sinister Secret is definitely teasing here, which is exciting. Okay, number 4. The dress code this year is huge diplomatic egg on your face. The Queen is most miffed, but at least she gets to get her revenge on a certain council member. The Queen here would be the White Queen, Emma Frost, who of course runs the Hellfire Gala. I would have to imagine revenge on a certain council member would be Professor X, who here has scorned Emma more because of hiding the secret. Obviously, Magneto's off the Quiet Council now, so I think that leaves our boy Charlie. Obviously, as far as what the specific diplomatic egg on your face is, I do not know. We'll find out at the Hellfire Gala, but obviously I think Emma's going to get revenge on Charlie X. 5. It's Judgment Day. Let's hope we're not being judged for our spelling choices. It's Judgment, you ruffians. This is purely a teaser for X. Judgment Day, as we talked about, which, as it turns out, there's a US and a UK spelling of judgment, and there's clearly going to be some kind of revolutionary war over who actually has it right. Right now, I alternate at times. I think it's most natural for me to include the E as well, a la writing the full word of judgment. But, it's one of those things. You gotta pick a side. All right, number 6. Is an island nation going to be destroyed? Maybe, but don't worry, it's not ours. Okay, Krakoa is not going to get destroyed. Could this mean more terror for Terra Verde? Maybe. My guess here is Madripoor. I think this is probably going to refer to Madripoor, which obviously has been, has had Hominis Ferendi versus the Marauders for a minute. I think if you're going to take out an island in Marvel, it's probably going to be a fictional one. And I think, the Inhumans aren't on an island anymore. Are they? The Inhumans aren't anywhere right now, I guess. I guess that doesn't help at all. So my guess here is Madripoor. Okay. Number 7. Which blue mutant is going to see red? The most obvious answer here would be Nightcrawler, back on Mars with Legion, but I definitely am curious if anyone has any other theories, okay, who that could be. We're talking blue mutants. Obviously, we could bring Apocalypse into the mix. Could Apocalypse come to the people of Arakko on Mars? That's more exciting. I think that's more interesting if it's that, because otherwise it's just like, if it's Nightcrawler going to Mars, that's just like, hey, Legion of X is coming by Cy Spurrier. That's just like a very simple book tease. Apocalypse, though, meeting back up with the Arakko people, that's actually a big deal. That's actually a big deal. So that would be good. I see here by Jason Beast getting clapped. Okay. Put a bow on this. I have no idea what this is going to play like. Like, it's going to be like 40 minutes of no conversation, no video, but a killer live chat. I did hop into the live chat, and the live chat was still going for a while there. So maybe that's what it'll play back for everyone else. But otherwise, I did have to pop back on. My internet just came back. Just totally crashed today. We got storms in the area. And clearly I was saying something that Beast did not approve of. And they shut me down. I got too close to the truth. And yet again, they shut me down. But I wanted to join now just to say thank you for joining. Thanks for listening. Immortal X-Men was very good. Enjoy the comics.